All right. Welcome back. Hope you had a good long weekend. But I think we're about half a week behind. So the assignment that was going to be due this weekend is actually due next weekend, right? And that means that all the other assignments are going to be moved 1 week. Although the project assignments, I think they could stay, right? Because they don't require you to actually code anything, right? You're designing, you're drawing, you're thinking about your project, right? So those could stay the same due dates, but certainly all the ones that require you to code and review some of the material that we haven't covered just yet, those have some dependencies, so those will have to be pushed a week. Right, so you should be working on the third assignment, which is basically convert the static pages that we originally had. We were working on that we prototyped early on in the second assignment, converting them into dynamic pages using AngularJS. Right, last lecture we introduced Angular. We showed you how to create Angular application, how to create controllers, how to create models, we talked about two-way binding. Today I'd like to expand on that and introduce another topic, also in Angular, in how to handle navigation. How do you navigate from one page to the next? In a typical application, you use anchors. Right? You have a hyperlink, right? You click on it, and that hyperlink typically connects to or refers to a physical page, right? Some other HTML page, and when you click on it, the page that you're on, right? It's unloaded, and then the new file is loaded into the browser, right? Replacing the old file. Okay? And that has been the typical model and the way that we've been implementing applications for quite a while. But with the demand of web applications being more responsive, being more dynamic, right, and interactive, right, as we interact with the application, we like to see things interact much more fluidly. We've been looking at other ways of implementing applications, and we're considering using the single-page application way of implementing applications, right? So in that model, we don't reload pages. We don't navigate from one page and then throw that away and then completely load a completely new page and so on and so forth. What we do is that we load one page, right, or maybe a couple of pages, and we make the most of that one page that we load, right? We dynamically load other content onto that page, right, displaying partial sections of the application, right, building the web page in terms of smaller templates, right, that build the entire page, right? And when we navigate from one page to the next, when we want to kind of like change modes between applications, right? We want to see an entire different content. What we do is we load the content dynamically, right, and replace, right, in a placeholder the new content, right? So we give you the same functionality of navigation, but without loading and reloading, right, the page. Okay, so I'd like to talk about that today. The site has quite a few examples, right, with the source code that I invite you to take a look at. But I'd like to demonstrate to you how we could build it and how you could use this technique to use it for the assignment that you're working on. Okay, obviously I will make a much smaller version of something that you can then use, right, for later use in your assignments or projects. Okay. All right. With that said, let's take take a look at what we have here. Let's start the server for our web application. So this is our portal, and you can take a look at some of the examples here. Oh, I changed this to be a drop-down because I was creating many examples, right? It was just way too big to show, so I made it a drop-down. The ones we're going to be talking about today are some of the routing examples that using ng-route, and the routing examples are down below, right? And you can certainly take a look at those examples, but I'd like to demo for you. Let's look at this real quick. Let's see. There's a couple pages here. Here's the HTML index page that gets loaded, and let's actually bring this up on its own. And notice that as I click between home, profile, and admin, notice that this is changing, right? What's really happening is that this entire content over here, even the lorem ipsum, is being loaded dynamically, right? So that this whole portion here is being reloaded. Notice that the bottom is not being reloaded, right? That stays. But this technique of routing to different content loaded dynamically can be extended to to implement entire pages, right, or large sections of content, right, where you have maybe the header for the navigation, maybe the sidebar also for navigation, and then the main content, right, changes from one page to the next as you click on the various navigational links, right, but without throwing away the entire page, right? You only load the pieces that you need, right? So to show you how this works, let me show you here the HTML. Well, we're loading Bootstrap, which we'll also do when we demo this. We're loading from the CDN. We're also loading two AngularJS related JavaScript libraries, right? The first one is the core, right? Angular.js. That's the core. And then below is the module, the route module, right? That allows you to implement routing, right? You know, when you have these links, when you click on these links, show these pages, these pieces of content. Then below that we have app.js, which is the actual implementation of our application, which we already started looking at that last week, and we looked at in a minute. Now down below, notice that we have a very simple couple of links here, right? Very simple navigation, just 3 pages. We have home. Right, home, profile, and admin, right? And notice the href. See the href? Notice that they start with a hash sign. Okay, they're not actually linking to any other page out there, right? They're not linking to home.html or profile.html or admin.html, right? Meaning we're never actually leaving this page, right? What we're doing is using a technique that has been around for quite a while, right? But was used for a different purpose, right? If you remember, in HTML, you could create anchors, right, with IDs, yes, all throughout your documents, right? Maybe one per section. Maybe you have a very long page, right? And the various sections you might put an anchor, right, in these sections at the top of the section. Then above, you could create links such as these, right, with the hashtag in front of it that would allow you to jump to the various sections in the same page, right? Okay, you could actually bookmark these, subsections in a page, and you can send it to someone, right? And when they click on the link, they come back to that document at that particular section, right? You scroll all the way down, right, halfway in the document. Right, so this technique has been around in HTML for since inception, from the beginning. But we are single page applications hijack this feature. Okay, and make it their own, right? It's the basis, right, of the single page technique, in that they use JavaScript to detect, the change in the URL, the change at the end of the URL, that hash here, the hash there, hash home, hash profile. Notice that when we click on this, right, and we click on home, profile, admin, notice the hash at the end. You see that says /admin, /home, right? Well, you can write JavaScript that listens to these events, right? That this part of the URL has changed, right? And we can write logic that says, oh, you want this portion or that section. Let me throw away the DOM elements, right, that I don't need, and load the ones that I do need. Okay. One great thing about this technique is that well, you can click it, right? You can select it and send it to someone, right? And that someone, when they type that URL, they go back to exactly the same location where the document was when you sent it. See that it's admin, right where I left it in my other window. See that? Also, as you click on various links, right, they are added to the history, right, of the URL. Right, so the back button, right, works, right? So if you go to admin, you go to profile, and then you go to admin, right, and then you click on the back button, it goes back to profile, right? So those URLs are added to the history, right, so that the back button and the forward button work like you would expect, right, as if they were navigating between pages, right, and going back and forward between pages. I mean, it used to be a nightmare, to maintain and have the back button behave, consistently when you were working with, single page applications, right? Using this technique, the browser takes care of that for us for free. Okay, so let me keep working here. So notice that these are the links, right? Home, profile, and admin, which are these links, right? These three up here. And then notice that after that there's nothing. There is no content, right? There is no admin lorem ipsum or home lorem ipsum or profile, right? There's a placeholder. There's a placeholder ng-view, right? ng-view. That this is there's an attribute, there's a directive, an Angular directive, right? Part of the routing module, right? That allows you to implement these single page applications, right? It says, I want to load the content dynamically into this section, right? Whatever that content is, I'll tell you in a minute what section it is, right? Notice that down below, everything else is just static, example, source code, blah, 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 right? It's just this documentation down below, documentation. But the content, this is the main content, the profile, right, the home, and the admin, right? This content, right, is what's being loaded dynamically onto the DOM. That makes sense, right? So what remains to be done is configure, what goes in this ng-view, what should go in this ng-view, depending on what I click on, right? If I click on home, I want this HTML to go there, right? Or if I click on profile, I want this other content to go there, right? We need to configure that, right? In regular HTML, if you're using regular anchors, the way you configure that is in the href, right? In the href, you say, if they click on this text, this is the HTML I want to go to, right? The mapping is part of the anchor, right? Text, href, text, href. It's part of the anchor. Here we don't have that, right? In the anchors, this is saying stay in this same page. Don't leave this page. I want you to jump into a different section of this page. That's what that says. Never leave this page. But what we really want to do is we want to load content, different pieces of content as they click each one of these three. But that's not supported natively. Angular routing adds that ability, right, of doing the mapping between clicking on this, show this, click that, show that, right? Now the actual pages that we're gonna feed in here are these, right? Here's admin. So it's admin, lorem ipsum, right? Here's home. They're all the same, right? Except that the title is different. Okay. These are the three partial HTML pages. They're not HTML pages on their own right. So they don't have an HTML tag. They don't have a header tag. They don't even have a body. Right? If we open them and look at the source, okay, it's just a snippet of HTML. Right? It's not a full-blown HTML document. It's only a snippet. Why? Because it's going to be embedded, right, into a larger document, right? That is providing the HTML, the header, the body, everything else. It's also providing navigation, right? Providing the links for the navigation. Yes? Okay. Okay. So what remains is, oops. What happened? Okay. What remains is the configuration. How do you configure? Right, we want to be able to configure that when you click on this, you show this. When you click on that, you show that, right? And the way we do that is through .config. We go to Angular, say Angular, and then it says .module. It says, for this application that I declared earlier, right? Well, no, actually, I'm sorry. Here's where we're declaring. We're declaring it right here. There's a whiteboard application, and notice that the array here, if you remember, that array states my dependencies, right? What does this module, does it depend on other modules? In our first example, last week, we didn't depend on anything, right? In this case, we are dependent, right? But we are using another module, right? The routing module, which declares a namespace, right? It declares a name. It's named ng-route. That's the name, right? And the way you declare these dependencies is by listing their names in that array. Okay, I believe this is the only routing, the only module that we're going to be using. Throughout the semester. So I think that's the only dependency that we're going to be using. So this is going to be a very typical declaration of these applications. Then, after the main module whiteboard app is declared, we're going into a .config. .config is also part of the Angular API. It allows you to configure, meaning before the application runs, before I do anything, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up certain things. Okay, it allows you to, I haven't looked at the DOM. I haven't looked at anything yet, right? I don't know what these things look like. I want to configure myself, right? It's like I'm running main, right? And I'm gonna maybe do a database connection. I'll load some files, right? I need to configure myself, right? And here's a place to do it, right? And to configure, you have to provide a function. You have to provide a function, either declared here as an embedded anonymous function, which is, again, many of you might find that disturbing syntax, but nevertheless, it's a very common thing to do to have an anonymous function as a parameter being passed to config. The config is a function. Notice that, right? .config is a function that takes as argument a function. Okay. So anyway, so here's a function, and in that function, the config will pass to you whatever configuration providers you might need. Right? There's a whole bunch of configuration providers that allow you to configure the framework any which way. Okay. Well, there are a couple of providers that allow you to configure the routing, right? That we loaded when we loaded the Angular-route library, right? The routing library, the ng-route, right? That's a part of the library that allows you to configure routing. Right, and the way it provides it to you is you ask it by name. The name that is that's the specific name. $ route provided. It's named that way. And by you providing the name of that in the function, it gets injected. Right, it gets passed to you, right, by inversion of control. Right. So here's route provider, and now you can provide all the mappings that you want. Right. So for instance, you can say, If the URL after the hash, this one only cares what's after the hash, right? It's only what's after the hash, because the page is the page we're always going to be in, right? So there's no point in talking about, the HTML document, right? Because it is the document I'm living on, and I'm never leaving this page, right? I'm always going to be in this page. I only care what happens after the hash. So this says, if after the hash you see a slash, well, for me, that's the root of the application, right? That's the default content that I should see. So this says, if you see a slash, // then the content that you should see, the content that should be injected into the ng view, right, is home.html, right, which is an actual file. It's an actual HTML document, right? Well, a partial HTML document, right? It doesn't have the headers and the bodies and whatnot, right? And then it says here, if instead after the hash sign you see a /profile, then the content should be profile.html. Okay. If you see /admin, then the content should be admin.html. You see that? Right. Again, in a regular application, when we're using just plain old anchors, this configuration is done at the anchor, right? When you say href, you actually give home.html or admin.html or profile.html, right? But what does that do? It reloads the page. That's not what we want. Okay? We are we are loading this content dynamically on demand, right? When you see changes in the URL. Give you the same functionality. Right? Give me the same functionality of navigation. Yes? Right? And finally, down here we have an otherwise, meaning if it's none of those, right? If it's none of these patterns, you can create patterns, right? You can create like regular expressions, right? Of what these URLs might look like, right? If it's none of those, right? Well, I want my default content to be whatever / says. Right? It's as if you would have typed /. So if you type something gibberish, garbage, right? I'll just default to the /, which is what? Home. See that? Right? So if we try that, and we come here, and notice that it's /, right? And if I type here admin, notice that the content changed to admin. You see that? Or if I type profile, it goes to profile, right? If I type some garbage, right, it assumes that it's just a regular /, right? It gets replaced with the /. Make sense? Notice that the page never reloaded, right? If we look at the network, you will see that there is no traffic between these. Make sense? Yes.
So a couple of questions. So now we use hash to navigate within the page. So if I need to navigate within a particular page, like earlier we used to use hash ID. So is it possible with Angular now?
What do you mean?
Like I have hash profiles, profiles, and now within the profile page I want to navigate to a particular section of the page.
Yes.
So will I be able to do that?
Without you mean like scroll all the way down to
yes, to a specific part of it. Like because earlier we used to use hash ID.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be all. No.
And secondly, I had read somewhere, the hashbang URLs. So is it different from this?
No, it's with this, yeah, which is useful for older browsers as well. Yeah, it does support this. Right. So, yes.
You have used template URL in your app.js.
Yes.
Is it a placeholder for something on the HTML?
What do you mean? Where? This over here?
Yes.
What do you mean is a placeholder? Notice it's a JSON object, right? Curly bracket. So template URL is the name of the property, right? And then we give the value, home.html is the value of that property.
So it will replace the content within the
ng view. Yeah, whatever the ng view, that's where the content will be injected. Okay. Right. Yes.
So what's the difference between this kind of technology and the Ajax when do not need to reload the page.
What other content? I'm sorry, what other technology? Ajax?
Ajax, yeah.
Okay, this is using Ajax
Oh,
down behind the scenes. Okay, right? So it is asynchronous going and fetching the content, right, and putting it in there for you. Yes, so underneath it uses Ajax. If we had to do it by hand, we would use Ajax to do that. Yes.
Can I have multi-NGBO inside one page?
I'm sorry?
Can I have multi-NGBO inside one page?
They would. Yes, you could, and you could also have nested views. For that, you need to use another module, right, which is a UI views. I believe it's called UI view, which we'll play around with. Like for instance, you can have it's more like a state. You instead of using views, they call them states, right? So you can create states of the application, and you can traverse between these states as you click through content. So for instance, you can have an outer navigational links, right, that load a page that now has other links, right, and that page might have, as you click on it, might load pages that have links within that, right, so you can nest them. The default NGView does not support nesting and these more advanced navigational ways. Okay. Yes.
I'm not clear on this asynchronous thing.
Right. So if you remember, last week was it last week or maybe on Monday, we used Ajax to query for content dynamically. Right. We asked for, in that case we were asking for JSON, JSON objects. Right. We go to a URL, and that URL would give back JSON. Yes. Well, that's asynchronous. Yes. Part of the acronym asynchronous. JavaScript for XML, right? But not only can you fetch data, you can also fetch actual content, right? So you can say get, right, and you can give it an actual URL of a page. It will load it, and then you can do whatever you want to it, right? You can give it a parent div or a parent element, right? And it will put that content inside of that parent element, and it's done asynchronously, meaning. Since it might take a while for the server to come back, and since the browser only has one thread, in JavaScript is single threaded, your browser will lock up, right, waiting for that content to come back, right? So instead, it uses asynchronous, right? It says, browser, go fetch this for me, but don't block me. I want to continue, right? Instead, notify me by calling this function that I'm giving you. Right, call me back whenever you're done, right? Give me the content, and then I'll continue from there on. Okay? Yep. Yes. So let's demo this. So let's build on what we just looked at. This was a very simple hello world example of creating, a very simplistic navigation and loading very simple content. Right. So let's build on this. Okay. Right. So let's talk about now ng route. Right. That it's going to allow us to implement navigation in single page applications. So let's create here a directory where we can play around with this. So let's create a directory in here. Call it ng route. And let's create an index page here. And we'll see ng route. Let's load the libraries that we need. So we'll go to load Bootstrap. Link, href. Okay, and then let's load the libraries that we need. JavaScript libraries. We'll go maybe Angular, CDN. So here's the ones that are hosted by Google. So here's Angular. Fix that. Okay, that's Angular right from Google. We'll also load the other one, route. So dash route. There it is. And here let's create some content. We'll say div class container, right? That's a bootstrap class, right? That's going to add some padding from on other side. Here let's just say hello to see if this is actually working, right? Hello from ng route. So this is under lectures, AngularJS, ng route, right? So let's see if we can go there. This is lectures, AngularJS / ng route. Okay, so hello from ng route. So the page is deployed locally. Let's create maybe let's see, a navigation at the top, right? That has login, register, log out, things like that, right? And then on the left-hand side, we'll create a home page and maybe a couple of links there, right? So let's mimic what you're working on your assignment. In your assignment, you need to use Bootstrap's the dashboard template, right? I'm not gonna do that here because it's quite a lot of HTML, right? So I'm gonna create something simpler. So I'm gonna create here a row, right? And in that row, that first row, I'm gonna add my navigation in there, right? So we'll have here div class, maybe a column. We'll take up the entire width, and I'm going to create here navigation with UL, and it'll be maybe an anchor, href. This will be, let's see, what do we want? We want to be able to register, right? So we'll say register for registration page. Maybe oops. Copy, paste. Okay. I want to register, then I want to be able to log in. Bless you. I want to be able to log out. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so it looks like that right now, but we can make it an inline. You can say class list inline. All right, so that becomes stretched out. That's a bootstrap class, right? And also maybe we want to bring it to the right-hand side, right? So let's bring this navigation. Let's pull right. That's going to pull this whole thing to the right-hand side. Okay. Then below that, we're going to create another row. We're going to create another row. We're just going to have two columns. Maybe a column on the left-hand side with navigation there, right? And then another big column where the main content is going to live. Okay. So let's have here div class column MD2. And down below it's going to be our main contents. So div class column MD10. All right, so here I'm using a Bootstrap grid system, right, to break up the page, right. In here we're going to create some navigation. So this is navigation UL, and this is going to be actually let's use one of let's create the hyperlinks first. Let's see, href, and this will be maybe I want to be able to go home. And I'd like to be able to see courses, right? Let's just have that for now. There it is on the left-hand side, right? And we can make that a little bit prettier by saying that I want this to be nav pills, I think. There it is. Right? These are pills, and maybe these also could be pills up above, right? So we call this. These are navigation nav pills, right? These are all Bootstrap classes, right? Very good. And as we click on these, notice that on the top, the hyperlinks don't change. Why don't change? Wait, does these change? Oh, did I mistype something? Okay, no, this is supposed to be courses. There we go. All right, and these are links. Very good. Okay, so we have the beginnings of a navigational system here, okay? And in the main content, here's where we're going to be injecting the content dynamically as we navigate from one place to the next. Everybody okay? All right. Let's see. Let's create some of that content. Let's create maybe a couple pages. Maybe home.html. Oh my goodness, that's small. So this would be h1 home. Okay. Now let's create another one, maybe register. Just a placeholder for now. Okay. Register. H1 register. Okay. And what we want to do is that, when you click on home, I would like to see home page. Yes. And when you click on register, I'd like to see the registration page. Yes. Like you would normally do if this were a normal website that uses regular hyperlinks. But instead of each one of those pages copying and pasting the navigational, right, the sidebars and the headers, they're already there, right? They're not repeated over and over all throughout the pages like we had to do in an earlier assignment. Yes? Okay, we are reusing this content. All right. Okay, so let's do that. So to do that, let's first declare this to be an ng app, and this is a whiteboard app, and we're going to load our script for our application. Script source, and this is app.js, which doesn't exist yet. We're going to write it in a second. And then we're going to declare here a controller, right? That's going to be kind of like our main controller. Is going to take into account, take control over the entire application, right? And then underneath we can have nested controllers, right? That deal with the individual pieces, right? So each page presumably will deal with its own controller, right? For instance, the login and the registration page need to be able to retrieve information from the input fields, right? They need to go to the server to see if these people exist, right? Courses need to iterate over courses, right? And display them maybe in a tabular format, right? We'll do that a little later. But for now, we're going to have a top-level controller, which is going to deal with things such as navigation, right? Clicking here, clicking there, right? And some logic in there, right? So let's declare a controller here. We'll say ng controller, and this will be main controller. And finally, we're going to put in here the placeholder, a placeholder where the various content will be injected dynamically as we navigate from one portion to the next. Okay, so we'll say here div. Oh, actually, we can just say this div is the ng view. Okay, we don't need to put that. Everybody okay? Yes? All right. All right, so that's very good. So let's create our the JavaScript for our Angular application. We'll call it app.js. Okay. And in here, we're going to use the immediately invoked function expression. There it is. And in here, we're going to use Angular. Then we'll say we create the module. And the module is going to be what the same thing we called it in index, right? What do we call it? Whiteboard app. Those need to match, right? Meaning, you're responsible for that content over there, right? And we do depend on one module, right? Which is this one, right? The Angular route module, which we're loading here. And it's declared inside of a module called ng route. Okay. Now that we have the module declared, we're going to configure it. Configure, and so here we put the function, but I don't like to put the function nested in here anonymously. I actually like to provide a function, and the function is going to be declared here. Configure. Okay, right there it is. So this function is going to be called with the provider, the configuration provider that we asked for. Right, we're going to ask for the routing provider, the route provider. Right, and this is going to allow us to configure. Right, if you click on this particular URL, you navigate here. If we click on that, this is the content that's dynamically loaded. Right, so we could say we're going to configure that route provider. We're going to say when you see a / right, then I want you to use the following template URL, right? So we already have home.html. There it is. If instead you see, what's the other one we created? Register, right? Register / register. Then instead, I want you to use this other content. Okay, right. Let's load our content. Where is it? Here it is. Home. Doesn't seem to be working. Let's see. Inspect. Let's see what's complaining. Console. Error. Main controller. Oh, the main controller doesn't exist. The main controller is, we never created the main controller that is declared in index, right? Where is it? There it is, main controller. So yeah, let's create that maybe in a separate script. We'll call it inside of source. Maybe we'll call it main controller.js. How's that? And we'll create it here in a separate JavaScript file. And we'll just put here saying that using the immediately invoked function expression, and here we're going to create that controller. Say dot module, and the module is called whiteboard app, right? And we're declaring here a controller called main controller, implemented by a function called main controller, and that function is here. That's the controller. And right now, it's not going to do anything. We don't need for it to do anything. Yes.
You need to say that it depends on ng route.
We don't. Right. That's only when you are declaring the top level module. Well, actually, this could depend on other modules, right? But it is that top module that is handling those ngView, it loads it up just once at the top level. Right? If you would have this module only depending on other sub-modules, then yes, you would declare it here. Right now, the main control is not doing anything for now, right? We'll use it in a second. I just want to get over this error. Okay, there it is. So yeah, so indeed, clicking on register loads dynamically the register content, or clicking on home doesn't load anything. Why not? Home. Do we have home? Oh, no, actually, it's not home. It's slash, right? Yeah. Right. So we can either configure it differently, right? If we click on home, we could say, right, that if it's you could say otherwise, then we want to redirect to home. Right? Did I write that correctly? Redirect to, is it capital T? Oh, redirect to. So let's go back to our home. Right, so if I click anything else, any garbage, it goes back home, right? Even forward slash the root. That makes sense? All right, so certainly you can imagine how this could be extended, right, to to navigate all to the various sections in your assignment, right? You do have register, login, right? And each one of those pages, you've already created those pages, haven't you? Right? You already have the content. You already have those forms, right? The only thing that you're doing in the assignment is just stripping out the stuff that that is already in the main page, right? You already have the header in the main page. You already have the left side nav bar, right? So you don't need to repeat that over and over in home.html and register.html, login. So you have to strip that out. That makes sense? All right. All right. So we wrote main controller. And one of the things that we're going to do in main controller is that we would like to be able to know, where are we, right? Where are we, and what page are we at, right? And what should happen? Maybe, for instance, if you're in home, I like to be able to highlight home, right? Or if you register, I like to be able to, the register to be highlighted. Okay. In the previous, the way we previously did it is that, right, this HTML lived in each one of the pages, right? So you were free to do whatever styling you wanted to do for that particular page, right? So in the register.html, you would highlight register, or in the home page, you would highlight home, right? But because that content was copied and pasted over and over and over, right? It didn't depend on each other. You just had to make sure that it looked okay, right? Once you navigated from one to the other, right? Over here, it only lives in one single place, right? So how do you know? What logic could you write to highlight one or the other? Well, you could use the URL itself, right? If we could parse that URL, right, this would tell us where we are, right? And we could highlight one section or the other. Yes? Actually, that's one of the main design goals of single page application, is that the state of the application is entirely determined by that URL. Okay? If I send you this URL and I send it to anyone else, if they have access, if they have authenticated, and whatever, right? Besides the point of knowing if you even have access to something, right? If I send you that URL, you should be able to see exactly what I see, right? I should be able to bookmark these, right? So that if I click on this, I'll go back to where this application was at this particular snapshot of time or state. The state of the application should be entirely defined by that URL, right? If I'm looking at a particular course, right, then the ID of that course should be part of the URL, so that, right? If I have that URL and I paste it anywhere else, I will see that particular course, right? Or a particular student or a particular whatever, right? Any modification that as I navigate and I click here, click there, and interact, right? It should be captured in that URL so that I can always reconstitute my application from that URL. Make sense? And up to this point, we have that, right? It's a very simple state, right? We're just just show static content, but we'll see in a minute. When we get courses, I like to be able maybe to navigate to a course, right? I click on a particular course, right? And I like to be able to have that reflected in the URL. So if I send that, if I bookmark that or send it over, that is reconstituted. Anyway, everybody okay? They're still with me? All right. Right. So one of the things that we're going to do in the main controller is use that URL to be able to know where we are and what needs to be highlighted. Okay. So to do that, we can ask the main controller for another service. It's called the location service. Location service deals with that URL up there. Okay. Where am I? Where is my current location? Okay. So what we could do is that we can send it to the view, to the HTML. Hey, HTML, here's the location, so that you can, ask it, where are you? And then accordingly highlight things or hide things or show things. Okay. So we could say, if you remember the scope, what was the scope? Scope is a variable, right? That represents the DOM, right? The section, your particular subset of the world that you're responsible for, right? So this scope represents the scope of this, which happens to be the body, right? So it's everything. So everything is my scope, right? The entire document is my scope, right? Okay. So I can say, hey, scope, right? If you remember, I could say scope.hello, right? And that hello, right, so hello from main controller, right? If you remember the example we looked at last week, I can add variables to the scope that can then are now available in both the controller, obviously, because I declare it in the controller, and they're also available in the view, right? And there's a two-way binding. Whatever the view does to this variable, the controller sees it, right? Whatever the controller does to the variable, the view sees it. Yes, right? So to represent this in the view, I can use either ng model, right, like we did last week, using input fields, or I can use templates, right? This double curly brackets. Yes. So for instance, I could here say h1. I could say h1 and then the hello. Right? Hello. I say hello. Right? That's the variable. So there's a two-way binding between these variables. Right? So if I refresh, notice it says hello from main controller. Right? And that's this variable hello. Right? It's an h1. Maybe it's a little bit too big. Maybe I'll say label. Okay, it's a little smaller. Okay. So for hello from controller. So whatever the controller does to it, I refresh, right? It renders. Everybody okay? Right. Anyway, so but I don't want to do that. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do. So I'm going to remove this. Okay. What I want to do is send to the view this location. I want to give this access to the view. I want to have it access to this location, right? So I can create a variable, scope. To be consistent, I'm going to use the same name of the variable. So I know this is a variable that is actually the location service, right? So I'm going to call it the same location. I don't have to. I could choose any name I want. Okay? Is equal to location. Okay. So in the view, in label, I could render location because it's the controller sent it to me, right? And it puts it in a variable. So if I re-render, notice it's an object, right? Notice the curly bracket that tells me it's an object. Okay. One of the things that I can do with the object has an API. One of the things that you can ask it is what is my current URL? Where am I? Okay. I can ask it, what is the current URL I'm in? Yeah. Okay. If I do that, notice it says /home. You are in home, right? And if I click on register, it says that I'm in register. Okay. You see that? Right. So wherever I click, right, the location.url can tell me where I am. Everybody okay? Okay. So I could use this. So to do this, for instance. Notice that if I click on register, I would like that to be active, right? I want it to look like this. I want it to look like this. I can say li class. Right? That's what I want it to look like, right? If I click on home, notice that I'm at home, right? But notice that register is still active, right? Because it's hard-coded, right? So I don't want this to be hard-coded. I want it to be logically turned on and off, right? Depending on what? Depending on that, right? See that? Right? I could use that URL to tell me, where am I? Oh, I'm in home. I should highlight home. Where am I? Register? Oh, then I should highlight register. Make sense? Right? Okay. So I don't want this class to be hard-coded, a hard-coded class. I don't want it to be a hard-coded class. I want it to be a calculated class. I want it to be a logical class, right? I want it to change from time to time. I want it to be this. I want if something happens, or something else if something else happens, right? So I could use an attribute, right, a directive, ng class. Right, Angular, right, allows you to logically calculate what the class should be. Okay, and you could give it an expression. Wait, not there. Sorry, here, ng class. No, not that one either. Where's the li? Oh, there it is. Sorry, ng class. There it is. So I want the class for this li to be calculated. I want it to be active when the URL is register, and not active if it's not. Okay, so instead of this being a hard-coded string, I could give it an object that will be parsed and evaluated by ng class. Ng class will look at this expression, will evaluate it to true or false. If it's true, it'll turn on certain classes or not. Okay, so this object, you can say it, you can give it two things. You can give it the class that you want if the following is true. It's an object, right? So remember, name, value pairs, name, value, comma, name, value, comma, right? So here's my first name, value pair, right? Here's the name. My value is this. I'm gonna ask if the location URL, contains string register, meaning if this is not -1, meaning if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, right? -1 means that it's not contained, right? Index of searches a substring, right? If you find, this says, if in the location URL you find a substring called register, that's the -1, right? Not equal to -1. Then if this value is to true, this class will be used, right? So let's save that. If we refresh, so notice if I go to home, if I go to register, register highlights. If I go anywhere else, it does not highlight. See that? So I could do that. I could use this same technique for all of these, right? You can say if it's login, if it's log out, if it's home, or if it's courses. Okay, so now if I click on home, it's that one's and register, or home, or register. That makes sense? And if I send this URL to someone, right, the appropriate link is highlighted. This makes sense? Everybody still with me? Okay. All right. All right. Notice that the only ones that highlight is register and home, because we haven't done the other ones, right? I didn't do login. I didn't do log out, right? I didn't do any of those, right? But I'm not it's the same thing, right? It's coming in here, right, and configuring all of these, right? So let's do a couple more, maybe. Let's do courses. Okay, and maybe login. Login. Okay. All right. So, and let's put placeholders for those pages. So it's courses.html. So this will be h1 courses, and then another one. This will be login.html. Yes.
Now, if those separate HTML files had scripts associated with them, would we need to use the Angular CDN, for example? Or?
No, those are already loaded.
So
You mean separate scripts? What do you mean separate scripts? Like
well, you get a script for
a controller? Like
Yeah,
each page having a controller?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have to load them in index.
In index only. You wouldn't need
Yeah,
to do
no,
this.
only in index, right? Yep. Or you would use a technique called that allows you to load them dynamically, okay? So that you only load the scripts when you need them, right? You notice that this is a single page, right? And as things come and go, the DOM gets dirty, right? You're loading things. The memory demands on the browser increase, right? Because these pages not only they've been around for a while. The JavaScripts are asking for memory. They're releasing memory, right? Dynamic memory is coming and going. Oftentimes single page app developers, always hoping that there's a full reload of the page at some point where everything gets cleared out, right? And you can start at new, right? With a brand new memory footprint. Require.js is one of those mechanisms that allows you to load JavaScript. Just like here, we're loading the HTML on demand. You can also load the JavaScript on demand, right? Only when you need it, right? So Require.js is a particular good useful library that allows you to do that. Anyway, so let's see courses. Wait, did I reload? No. Yes.
So for one particular page, can we have just one script file, which contains also for the home page we had app.js and
Yep.
main controller.js. Can we do it all in one script file?
No, you shouldn't. You should break it up as much as possible. I'll show you in a second. But notice that home doesn't have a controller, right? Home does not have app.js. Actually, app.js is only associated to the entire application. It's not associated to any one page, right? It's associated to the entire HTML document, right? Each page will have its own controller, right? And we'll do that in a couple seconds, right? We'll do that in a minute. Right. Okay, so login. So if I go login, there is login, and notice that it highlights correctly, right? Register works, courses works, home, right? And I don't need this, right? So let's remove that. Let's remove that from the top level one, index. So let's remove this label here, and we'll just have here web No, whiteboard. There we go. Okay. Okay. You're still with me? All right. How are we doing with time? All right. Okay. So what I wanted to be able to do. So a lot of you are wondering, how do I break this up a little further, right? And if each page needs its own controller, how do I do that? Well, one of the things that we did here first is that here's the declaration of the application and the configuration. So they're both on the same JavaScript document, right? A better approach would be to split the declaration of the application and the configuration, have them in separate JavaScript files, right? It makes it easier to maintain, as these two might grow independently, right? So let's do that. So let's create another file here, and we call it config.js, right? And in here, we're going to copy some of the stuff in here. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to paste it in here, right? And what we're going to do here is that config.js is not going to declare dependency on ng-route, right? The only thing that it's doing is says, hey, for that module that was declared earlier, somebody declared this, I don't know who, but somebody declared whiteboard app, right? For that module, I want to declare this configuration. Okay, this is what this does, right? It's not creating the application brand new. It's only saying, hey, that application, I want to create this configuration. And then app can now just focus on just declaring the application, not configuring it, right? So this says, I'm going to remove the configuration from here. I'm only going to declare the application, right? And say that its dependency is ng-route. Okay, so I broke this up into now two pieces, right? One declares the application and its dependencies, and the other one declares the configuration, right? I need to load that in index. Let me go to an index. Right, here's the app, right, and the configuration. Okay, if I go back and reload, this should work just the same, right? Nothing has changed. Okay, and here's the controller. The controller for what? For the overall controller, right? Right now, that controller, the only responsibility of that controller is handling navigation, right? It's providing the location service to the view. That's the only thing it's doing, that controller, right? But anything that is common to all throughout the application could go in this controller, right? Maybe keeping track on the currently logged in user, right? So once you log in, right, I know who you are all throughout, yes? Right, so this would be a place where I can share things across different portions of the application. All right. Okay, so let's create here in courses. I want to list the courses, right? The courses that are available, maybe in a table format, right? So to do that, I need to create some kind of a data source, right? A data source where I can retrieve it. Where does the data live, right? Well, certainly not in the view. The controller is supposed to give me that, right? The controller's responsibility is to fetch data for me, give it to the view so that the view can display it, right? The view will operate on that data. We'll give it to the controller, and the controller will need to persist it and send it back to the server or database and whatnot. But it is the controller who does the shuffling back and forth of the data, okay? All right, so let's create a controller for courses, and it'll provide me with an array of courses. Yes? Let's do that. So let's create a controller. Let's create a course controller. Course controller. For that particular page, right? That is to be used with that particular page. Yes? Okay. So create a controller function. Again, Angular. I'm saying Angular for this particular module, which is the top level module, whiteboard app. Right? I want to declare a controller called, called course controller, and it's implemented by a function called course controller. They don't have to have the same name, right? But this is the name by which will be known throughout the application, right? Throughout the application, the controller that I'm going to create here will be known by name as course controller. The actual function that implements it, it's whatever you want to call it, right? But the name that is given is this one. So, oops, copy. So I'm going to create it here, function. Okay. So this course control will be used by the page course.html. Let's see how we can link them together. We need to be able to link them together and say, hey, this page uses that controller, right? So to do that, what we do here is we go to the configuration and say, we go back to the configuration and we say, hey, you know that course, see this page here, courses.html, when it gets loaded, I also want you to load a controller for it. Okay, I want you to load a controller, and the controller is called course controller. Okay, the name that we gave it. Okay, so now what happens is that this page, right, is associated with that controller. That HTML piece, that portion, right, the responsibility of the data that goes, the event handling, all the data that is displayed by it, okay, all that is being handled by this particular controller. Okay, so for instance, if the course, in the course, right, if I say hello, okay, in the controller, I can say hello. I can declare a scope, right? And what scope is that? It's that, it's that inside of the ng view when the HTML template gets loaded, right? It's that portion of the DOM. That's the only, my responsibility is only that. So I'm going to say scope hello. So hello from course controller. Okay. So now if I go back and I haven't reloaded my page, right? So here we're in courses, but if you reload, it doesn't work. Why didn't it work? Because we created the JavaScript, but we never loaded it from the index page, right? So it never loaded it, right? So let's load that. Let's go to the index page, and let's load that controller. So it's called course controller. There it is. There it is. Hello from course controller. Okay. So now this snippet, right? That bottom right content, right? The responsibility of the content in there is that controller. Make sense? And any event handler, any buttons I click, right, will go to that controller. Okay? Make sense? So that course controller can create data, right? It can create some data. Maybe you can have a var courses, courses, maybe an array of courses. You can have maybe one with title, Java 101. Seats available 12, and it starts new date. Okay, and we can create a couple of these. Maybe this is Node.js 101, and this is C# 101, and this is ASP.NET 101, right? Right, and I can send this array to the view. I can say scope courses, right? Now the view sees this array, right? Right, and where is it? Courses, course.html. I can say courses, right? So, let me see the array that you gave me, right? Let me see it. So when I reload, right? Notice that the array is there. The array is there, right? As raw JSON. Notice that it even added, the double quotes, even though I didn't, right? This is its interpretation of that object. Okay. What I'd like to be able to do is render this maybe in a table, right? So what we could do is create a table, class table, and maybe table striped. Oops. Maybe have a t head here. Maybe have a t row, right, with a t head. Saying that this is a title. the seats, and this is the start, right? And then underneath, we can have a T body with a table row that shows in the TD, it shows the, what do we want to show here? The title, right? So somehow I would like to be able to say course, that title somehow, right? I want to iterate, I want to create a row for each course, right? So actually I want to iterate, I want to create a whole bunch of rows, right, for each course in that array, right? Meaning I want to repeat this row, right, for each course in the courses array, yes? So we can say I want to repeat, and you repeat this table row for each course in courses, right? So do this table row, copy and paste it over and over and over for each course. And that creates a context, right? You know, for each table row, as you iterate, you have a different course, right? So for the current course, in the current iteration, I want you to display the title, right? And I want you to display how many seats are available, and what's the start, right? So I want to display that as a row, as tables, as a rows and tables, right? And that date, I like to filter it and say that this is date. So it's date filter, right? So it parses it, right, and converts it. And there's tons of filters available in Angular, right? As currency, as okay. So notice that this data is the data that the controller provided and is provided to me here through the scope. Okay, very good. What I'd like to be able to do is perhaps add new courses, remove courses, right? So I would like to provide maybe at the end with a button, right? I could say maybe a button that if I click it, right? I like to be able to remove it, right? So maybe call a function called remove course, right? And I can provide which course am I removing, right? I can provide the actual course, right? Or I can provide an index. You know, which one is this in the original array? $index, right, is a local variable that changes, you know, from 0, 1, 2, 3 as you iterate over the array of courses, over the collection, right? So if it's index, we can paint this a little bit as a button danger, and say remove. Right, so if I click on remove, the controller will be invoked, right, with that function. This function needs to live in that controller, which it doesn't quite yet, right? So let's go back to the controller and create that event handler, right? We can say scope.remove course is a function that is going to be invoked, and we're going to take as argument an index, right? So let's say index, right? So we can, if we say here, a console.log index, right? If we look at the inspect, right, and we click on remove in the console, right? If I click here, it'll tell me which one I clicked on, right? I could use that index to remove it from the actual array, right? I could say, well, now that I know the index, I could just say the courses array. Which courses array? This is a local array, right? This is a local array in this function, right? That no one has access to it, right? This is the courses array that I sent over to the view. That's the courses I want to manipulate, right? I want to say courses array, right? I want to splice at the index location 1, meaning remove one element from the array at position index, right? Right. So if I reload this and I say click, it's removed, right? Notice that the text is changing at the top too, right? Because it's a string, right? Representation of that same object. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So the next thing that we'd like to be able to do is maybe add a newer course, or maybe edit the current course, right? So let's see how we would do that. First of all, let me just add here. It's driving me nuts. Non-breaking space. See this thin? It's thin here. It's thicker over here. It's because this has 3 table heads, but there's 4 TDs. Right. So I added an empty th at the end so that it's now the same all throughout. It was driving me nuts. So say you want to edit one of these, right? If you want to edit it, I don't remember last week. Do we have a form up here right under the header to be able to edit it? I think we did, didn't we? Maybe not. I don't remember. Anyway, I'll show you another way. Say I have buttons on here that allow me to edit, right? So I like to be able to navigate to another page, the edit page for the course. Yes, in that page, I should be able to change things such as the title of the course, number of seats, the start date, the end date, things like that, right? And maybe I have many more things that I like to be able to change, right? That are not available here in this array, right? In this table. This table is kind of like a summary description, yes? So what I'd like to be able to do is maybe navigate to another page where I have enough space to have a larger form, right? That I can edit the details about this page, maybe a details page, right? So let's do that. Let's add here a button, right? That allows me to navigate. But because I'm navigating, and this is another page, right? It's better if I use a hyperlink, right? Hyperlink are more meant for navigational purposes, right? When I want to be able to navigate, right? And access that. So not a button because I'm not, operating on it. I'm just navigating to another page, right? So I'm going to say href. I want to navigate. Where do I navigate? I don't have a page for this, right? I'd like to be able to say that I want to go to some, like a course edit page or something, right? So let's do that. Let's say course edit. Okay, course edit. And that will navigate me to the course edit page, right? Which doesn't exist yet, right? So we'll create it in a minute. And here we'll have edit, a button that I can click on edit. What is it? It says edit, right? But it's styled as a link. Let's style it as a button, just like the other one. So we could, even though it's not a button, I can style it like a button, right? I can say class button buttons primary, but not styled as a button, right? Also, let me. Right, so that would navigate me to a course edit page that doesn't exist yet. Let's create it. Let's create it over here. It says new HTML page. I'll call it course edit.html. And we'll say h1 edit course. Okay. We'll have to configure the navigation. Yes, we'll have to configure the navigation. So let's get back to our config and say that if it's course edit, this will go to course edit page. And we don't have a controller just yet. Okay, let's see if that works. Refresh. Let's click on edit. Okay, it goes to edit course. Goes to edit course. Notice that none of the hyperlinks are connected, right? Are highlighted. I'm in a different page, right? Now the thing is that I like to be able to say, well, which course are you editing, right? I need to know which course you're editing. So I could pass it as an argument, right? I could say, right, in my hyperlink, I could pass along here, right, the index of the course that I'm editing, right? So this index over here, notice that this index, I want that index to be right here, right? So I'm going to paste it here. Let's see what happens. If I go back, I reload, I click on edit, didn't work. Why didn't it work? What happened? Notice that if I hover over it, notice at the bottom, it says /$index. I don't want $index, I want 0 or 1 or 2 or 3, right? So that didn't work. So what happens here is that this is out, I need to put the curly brackets. Put the curly brackets. Why? Why is that? Why don't I have to here, but here I do? Well, here, right, this is a string that is being parsed by, right, a directive that is part of the framework. So it knows how to interpret $index. But over here, right, this is kind of like free-form text, right? As you know, these are just text, right? It doesn't distinguish this from any other piece of text, yes? So as far as it's concerned, it's just part of the template, right? It's just, you know, just characters, right? So just like we here are embedding, right? See that? We're retrieving data and then rendering the text content. Same thing here. We are getting the data and rendering as text. Okay, so if I do that and I refresh, now if I hover over it, notice that it says 0, right? 1, 2, 3. See that? Correctly. So if I click on it, it still doesn't work. What happened there? Right? Well, what happened is that the way the navigation works, the way that it was configured was that the URL is supposed to be /course edit with nothing after it, right? But you're giving me /course edit /something, which doesn't match. Yes, it doesn't match this pattern. So where do I go? To my default home. Make sense? So I need to say /something, right? But what is it? 0, 1, 2, 3, I don't know. It's a placeholder. I need to put kind of like a placeholder, right? So it's kind of like index or I don't know, well, I don't want to use index because I'm already using index here, am I not? I'm already using index, right? So it's kind of the term is being overloaded. Count, how's that? Count. Okay, so it's a placeholder, right? So now if I go back, I go to refresh, right? And I click on courses and I click on edit. Notice that I have it now in the URL. See that? It's in the URL, right? If I go back, notice that the back button works perfectly. If I go back, I click on that, right? Now it's edit 3. You see that at the top? Very good. So somehow I need to display the information for course number 3 or whatever, right, in this page, okay? But where is the data? So I'm in another page, but the data is living where? In that controller, right? Should I use the same controller? Where I shouldn't, right? Each page should have its own unique controller, right? So this edit page is going to deal with, you know, with buttons, with, you know, update buttons and a whole bunch of forms, right? So, but it needs the data, right? It needs the data for course number 3, but that data lives in another controller. Right? How can we share the data across controllers? We like to be able to share data across controllers, right? So let's architect this a little bit. Excuse me. Before we do that, let's create the controller for this. Controller. There would be a course edit controller. Okay, which doesn't exist yet. Let's create it. Create a controller for this. Let's copy this one. And it's called course edit controller. Okay. I am not going to replicate the data here. That's cheating. Don't do that. Right? There will be a central place where the data lives. Okay, which we'll do in a minute. And the controller is called course edit controller. Copy, paste, paste. Okay. I don't have courses. I don't have courses, right? And so there we go. Okay, so we're here. What I need to do is extract that index, right? I need to extract that index from the route, right? I need to parse it out. To do that, I can ask for another service called the route params, right? Which is, again, part of ng-route. It's part of that package ng-route that knows how to parse locations, indices, and whatnot, and all that, right? So I can alert, I can extract from the route params dot, what do I call it? Counter? Is that what I called it? In the configuration, count. That's what I called it. So what happens here is that when I navigate to course edit, yes, well, that placeholder is going to be parsed out, okay, and it's going to be associated to this variable, right? This variable called count, and it's going to be made available to me in the route params service, and I can ask for it by name. There it is, count. Okay, so now if I reload this, oh, we never created the control. We never loaded the controller in index. We have to do that, right? Go to index, and it's called, what's it called? Course edit. Control, yeah. There it is, 3. Right, so whatever I type here, 2. Alert 2. So I have that value here. I have the value. I just need the data. I need the data, the array. I need the array. So how do we share the array between these, right? So basically the mechanism is that we want to centralize access to the data in a single place, right? Instead of having it spread over several places, we're going to centralize it, right? And we're going to create a service around it. We're going to create a service, and the service is going to provide us with an API, right, that allows us to manipulate that data, right? Retrieve all the data, or retrieve the data by ID, or update the data, or delete data, or add data, right? The typical 4 or 5 CRUD operations, right, that we allow for any piece of data. But instead of having this spread out over several controllers, we're going to have it in a single place, and all controllers are going to use the same service, okay? And that's the way that we're going to share the data. So let's go back to let's create the service. Let's say new service. So we'll call it course service.js. So to create the service, what we're going to do is we're going to use Angular. We're going to use the module, same module as always, right? It's a whiteboard app, right? And we use a factory. A factory allows me to create a service that it can be shared across many different places. You know, just like the $ location, $ scope, all these services, they were created using this kind of type of mechanism, factories, okay? So here's a factory, and I'm going to call my service. I'm going to call course service, and it's going to be implemented by a function called course service. And here's a function, course service. So here I'm going to provide several functions that are going to operate on local data. Okay, either data that I'm retrieving from a server, right? Here's where I have the HTTP connection to go off into the server and get data from the server, right? Maintain state and caching, right? And providing the data to the controllers that then provide it to the view. So this is my centralized place where I manage data at the browser, right? My data management at the browser is through the service. Okay, never in a controller, never in a view, right? In a centralized place in a service, right? If I'm fetching data from a server, it would be here, right? Through Ajax, or if I'm going to some web API, it would be through here, okay? And the service, I'm going to create an object, a map. I'm going to create a map here, a JavaScript map. I'm going to say, get all courses, right? And so get all courses, and I'm going to return this service. Right? What this is doing is that it's creating an object, a map, right? That provides a name and a value, and the value is a function, right? Which we haven't implemented it. It's a function. Okay. Right. And I'm going to return that service to whoever is using the course service. Whoever gets a hold of this course service, right? They will be able to. This evaluates to this course service. Evaluates to this service object, so that I can call on this course service functions such as get all courses, which is this function over here. Here is where I'm going to centralize the access of the data. So let's go back to our course controller, which we had hard-coded. We hard-coded this, right? I'm going to remove it from here. I'm going to remove it from here, and I'm going to hard-code it in the service. I'm going to hard-code it in the service. This would not really be hard-coded. Where would it come from? From the server. But we don't have a server yet, right? So this is the closest thing that it would look like, right? It's as close to the server as we'll get to until we actually do the server, okay? So what does get all courses do? It returns all the courses. It says return courses, right? And so over here in the course controller, I want to use, I don't have the courses anymore. Where are they? I don't have it here in the controller. Where are they? In the service. I need to go through the service to get all the courses now, right? So to do that, just like the scope is a service, now I have my own service I just created, right? Call the course service. I can ask for it, just like I can ask for scope, I can ask for my own services that I create, right? So now I can say course service get all courses, okay? Right, let's see if this works or blows up. Let's load the course service, right, in index. We're gonna have to load it in index. So here's script, source, course service. And let's go back, let's reload. Go to courses. Really? It worked the first time? Resources, sources, course service. Let me make sure that it is coming through here. Let me make a breakpoint here. Reload. Ah, it is coming through there. Yeah, so it's coming through the service to fetch the actual data. That makes sense? Okay. One more thing before we go. Go. Typically, this service is going to use HTTP AJAX. It's going to use AJAX to go fetch the data to the server, right? So this over here, this is a synchronous call, right? But in here, really, it's going to use AJAX, and AJAX is going to be an asynchronous call, right? So it's not going to be able to just return the courses right away, right? It's going to have to be, as AJAX uses, callbacks, right? He says, whenever the success comes back, I will call you, let you know, right, when the data comes back. So really what it should be receiving here is a callback, yes? And in that callback, I will pass you the data later on, right? And that's what the homework asks you to do, right? To use callbacks, right? Even though here, because we're not using a server and we don't really need AJAX, okay? We're not using that callback, right? We don't need it. Really, we don't need it until we go to the server and use AJAX. When we go there, we either use callbacks or we'll use promises. We use promises. So that's another thing that we're going to fix. The other thing that we need to fix here is notice how my root directory is getting very, very busy. Okay. So instead of having everything here like this, right? Typically, we break them up into sections, right? Into features, right? So for instance, so everything about the course, like the course controller, the course edit controller, courses.html, right? Those would go into a separate directory, maybe called courses. Yes? If we do that, we need to go back and change our config pages, our configuration, right? Because we move things around. What else? Also, a naming convention. If it's a controller, a naming convention is that, excuse me, You give it the entity that you're operating, like a course or user or whatever, right? Forms, yes. If it's a controller, you say, the entity dot controller.js. If it's a view that is being rendered or a template, it's same thing, courses or forms dot view.html. It's a naming convention, okay? And I believe the assignment also makes use of that naming convention. So we'll come back and we'll do this again next Monday. If you didn't understand the whole thing, it's okay. We'll repeat this over and over a couple of times so that you have a chance to digest it. All right. I'll be in my office today till 2:30 if you want to come and chat. All right. Thank you.